Okay, so let us start. Okay, so we'll be looking at the fallacies of insufficient evidence. We'll be looking at what are fallacies of insufficient evidence and what are the 9 types of fallacies of insufficient evidence. Now, before we begin, I need you to understand what fallacies are all about. Yeah. We have 2 types. Fallacies are basically mistakes done in reasoning. Simple as that. When we say that the argument is fallacious, that means the argument has mistakes in reasoning. Itu je yang you kena faham. Okay, we are talking about mistakes, and we have 2 types of fallacies: fallacies of relevance and fallacies of insufficient evidence. Okay, now that those are the 2 main groups, and of course under those 2 main groups they have 11 types and 9 types respectively. Okay, now we have gone through the definition of fallacy of relevance, and it is mistakes in reasoning that occur because the premises are logically irrelevant to the conclusion. Okay, so you have the premises, you have the conclusion. Apparently the premises could be 1, could be 2, could be 3, could just be all of the premises, or could just be one of the premises, and they are, or it is illogically irrelevant to the conclusion. That is the definition of fallacy of relevance. And if you wish to know more, of course you have to refer back to my lecture notes and lecture videos for last week. Now, fallacy of insufficient evidence, mistakes in reasoning that occur because the premises, although they are logically relevant, however, they fail to provide sufficient evidence to support the conclusion. So, in these 2, you must understand the concept of relevance. Okay, the concept of relevance. One is irrelevant to the conclusion. The other one, they are relevant. However, they are lacked of insufficient evidence. So in this case, kalau you fikir, Mr. E, which one is even better? No, we're not comparing these 2. We are just making them or putting them into groups. Always remember, when it comes to fallacies, we are actually talking about mistakes. And it is very important for you to analyze these mistakes so that you will be able to differentiate good argument and bad argument. Itu je, konsep fallacies ni is for you to be able to differentiate between good argument and bad argument. And some of these bad argument, I'm so sorry, Jay, I just have to accept your friends joining. Okay, kalau tidak nanti kan dia tak dapat nak join. Okay. Alright. Of course, if you have question, please shoot your question in the chat box. I will refer to the questions later on, yeah? So let us go back to this. The reason why you need to understand the concept of fallacy ni, so that the concept of fallacy, so that you'll be able to differentiate between good arguments and bad arguments. It is as simple as that. Because nanti later on, since there are changes in terms of the format of your test and final test, and most likely you will be asked to answer questions in a paragraph level or as short essay level. So you must be able to understand the bigger picture of fallacies. And that is, if you learn the categories of fallacies, one is fallacy of relevance, the other one is fallacies of insufficient evidence, and you learn the types that fall below each category, then it'll be much easier for you to actually analyze, and also to put things into another perspective. You'll be utilizing this concept later on when you are doing analysis for your assignment as well as your oral presentation project. Okay, so you must be able to faham lah the concept. The bigger picture is, the moment you learn about fallacy, then you'll be able to know whether this is a good argument or a bad argument. And most of these bad arguments may sound good initially, or on the surface. Okay, on the surface. Nanti bila you dah, if you were to refer to what I've told you or what I've explained last week, and also what I'm about to do today, then you'll start to realize that I often come across this situation, and I always thought that this is, something that is good, something that betul lah ni, kesian dia, macam tu lah. You fall into that argument, you fall into that so-called, argument, or we call it argument, or you fall into that so-called persuasion, because you thought that it were true, but until you realize that, actually that person, whether or not he is doing it on purpose or without realizing it, he has committed few fallacies in arguing that issue. And I am some sort of like a person who has been trapped into that so-called scam, quote and unquote. And you will later on, when if you have experienced scammers calling you, you will realize there are few fallacies in terms of argument that they used, that so-called fallacies to, in order for them to to corner you, or to put you in a very difficult situation, to make you to agree with whatever that they are talking. Now, I give you a very good classic example. I think about a few months ago, I received a phone call. This person claimed to be representative of the so-called bank, and apparently I have settled with that bank so long time ago. I don't know how this person got the information, and then he was like telling I still have few things to pay, this and that. He was calling me using, like personal number, not through office number, and this and that. And then he scared me, sorry, he somehow developed fear, in a way of threatening me, to fall into his argument, saying that I have not cleared, the payment. We are going to bring this matter to the court lah, and then if let's say you are called to the court, you'll be needed to pay, not only for this lawyer fees pun you kena bayar, so on and so forth. So what kind of argument, sorry, what kind of fallacy that this person has committed, because he somehow managed to develop that so-called fear in me, or at least in that argument. Scare tactics, yes. So I believe when you are able to understand fallacies, then you realize that this person are employing, I don't call these strategies here, they are actually committing these fallacies on purpose, because they know that people will fall into it, that they will make people to feel guilty, so that people will just, and the reason why you say that, hey, how stupid can these people be, yeah, kasih 10,000 just like that to that scammer, tak fikir ke? You can never know how people can actually go to certain extent to exploit your mind, to manipulate your mind by just using these fallacies. So fallacies can also be a tool for this, apa ni, orang-orang jahat lah macam gini, to actually, gain your trust. This happens in many situations, under a lot of circumstances. Scammers, and sometimes two lovebirds, falling in love with each other, until to realize that one of them is actually, not genuinely into that relationship, and this and that, because people, dia mudah lah dipengaruhi. If you really use this fallacies, and or if you really employ these so-called fallacies in your argument, orang akan mudah terpengaruh. People will be easily influenced, because some of these fallacies can make you to appear convincing to others. Yeah. So the concept of fallacies in a bigger picture, you must be able to understand. And on top of that, undeniably, there are also people, when arguing and committing the fallacies without realizing it. Ada juga, because they don't know. Contohnya appeal to PT. You have learned this before last week. Appeal to PT, and now you will realize that, sometimes when you even watch commercials, advertisements, they use a lot of appeal to PT. in that so-called advertisements. Why? Because they want to lure you. They want you to feel, oh, kesiannya, okay lah, I'll buy. Oh, kesiannya, okay lah, I will donate. Stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. And whether or not committing fallacies are good or bad, we can argue on this. Okay, but from the perspective of critical thinking, when you are arguing on a matter, the matter has to be a clear cut matter without having fallacies committed in it. It has to be a clear cut. I'm not saying that fallacies are bad entirely. All right. So that is the part that is not discussed in any of the chapters, but maybe critical thinking advanced level adalah kot. So if you are into critical thinking, God knows you are in your second semester. Nanti later on, when you have reached your fourth semester, thinking of your FYP project or FYP title, if you want to look into critical thinking, you can always come and see me. All right, you can request to your apa ni KPP. Kata saya nak buat, I want to do about critical thinking. I would like to have Encik Ilyas or Mr. E as my supervisor. I will be more than delightful to actually assist you. Okay, and we can go beyond that. And there are a lot of things that we can actually explore in critical thinking. Yeah. So that is the bigger picture of fallacies. Okay. So today we are going to look at the second part pula, insufficient evidence. Yeah. And there are nine types of fallacies of insufficient evidence. We'll start with the first one: inappropriate appeal to authority. Now, the fallacy of inappropriate appeal to authority is committed when an arguer cites a witness or authority who there is good reason to believe is unreliable. It's simple as that. You are citing a person and that person is unreliable. You are citing a figura and that figura has unreliable source. Okay. So in general, is it reasonable to believe that a witness or an authority is unreliable? So here are some relevant circumstances. Now, these questions that I'm about to discuss and also explain to all of you have come out in last semester or 2 semesters ago, the final test. So I think it's very important for me to explain. But should you want to understand better by looking at the given examples, you still need to refer to the textbook, the PDF book. Yeah. Okay, the first question that you want to ask yourself is the source not an authority on the subject at issue? So an authority is a person who possesses special knowledge, competence, or expertise in a field. The most obvious way to commit the fallacy of inappropriate appeal to authority is to appeal to a person who is not a genuine authority on the subject at issue. For example, you come and see me, Mr. E, can you help me out, with my financial problems? Although I may have gone through few experiences when it comes to managing my finance, although I may have a little bit knowledge on finance or managing your finance, but I'm not an expert. An expert is a person who practically spends his or her time into that matter. Like in the case of mine, I am teaching critical thinking. I am doing a lot of research on critical thinking. I read a lot of things on critical thinking. I always improve my knowledge on critical thinking, so I can be considered as an expert. But kalau nak cakap expert tu maybe it's too big for a person. I can be considered as a person who has sheer interest or keen interest who is keen in that so-called subject matter. Okay, so yeah, you need to also assess on that part, yeah, to actually see whether that person is actually a person who is an expert in that matter. Number two is a source bias. So common sense tells us that we should be cautious about accepting a claim when the person making the claim is biased or has some other obvious motive to lie or mislead. When a person has a personal interest or when a person is directly involved in that matter, then that person has what we call conflict of interest. I give an example. Let's say there's a fight between you and the kids next door. So your dad came into the picture or came into that so-called fight. and trying to be as neutral as possible, but deep inside your dad can be biased because you are his son or daughter, unless that the kids next door's parent, one of them, also came into the fight, or perhaps came into that so-called picture, and then maybe we can see that you can solve that matter. But if just your dad, although trying to solve and trying to be neutral as possible, we know one way or another your dad can be biased. All right. So that is why it's very important for you to assess on that part as well. The third one is the accuracy of the source observations questionable. A source may also be unreliable if we have reason to doubt the accuracy of his or her observation or experiences. For example, that person can be a very well versed person in the area of flat earth. For example, he's been doing research on that, this and that. So he can be an expert on that matter, on that part. But up to this point, you can still see that there is no accuracy in any of that area. It has been proven the otherwise. It has been proven the otherwise scientifically, but because you can sense, or you notice that the whole concept of the earth is flat is unacceptable. It's not actually in science. It's just people making up things. And although that person has been an expert in that so-called area for like 20 years, okay, 20 years for example. So that's why you have the liberty, the power to reject that on that basis. And you'll be surprised that a lot of areas that were once considered as absurd, or at least contains absurdity in it, like the study of aliens, or supernatural, the study of ghosts, stuff like that, now has been accepted in the field of science. So yeah, we can never say for sure that things that we feel is wrong, because up until now it cannot be proven scientifically that ghosts do not exist. And the same thing happens for these so-called aliens and whatnot. But and that is the reason why it has been accepted in the field of science, because people still believe that we can do scientific research on them, on these two areas. But it may not be the same to the so-called flat earth issues, because it has been proven the otherwise scientifically. All right. The fourth is a source known to be generally reliable. So, general speaking, it is reasonable to accept claims made in reputable newspapers, magazine, encyclopedias, radio and television news programs, and internet website. But we must be cautious about accepting claims found in sources that we have reasons to believe are generally unreliable. Now, if you were to refer 10 years ago, 15 years ago, yeah, things that have been mentioned in the newspapers, things that have been mentioned in the so-called um, apa ni in the so-called newspapers, magazines, in the so-called television, even radio, kita boleh terima. We're talking about 10, 20 years ago. During my time dulu, yes, whatever lah that came out in the newspapers, we would accept them. But now we begin to question a lot of things that appear on newspapers, on television. Now, I give you two best examples. Lah. Recently, there was a news about one of Malaysians, or at least so-called Malaysian, staying abroad, being accepted for a scholarship offered by NASA. And it turned out that it was just a scam. Not sure whether the boy got, scammed by the scammer, or the boy is basically, or was basically scamming us. And his tweet got retweeted even by the current prime minister, thinking that that was true. So Now we are talking about this, when you see something that has been retweeted by the prime minister, and if we were to go by this notion, surely we'll just accept that news, wouldn't we? But the question now remains, is it reliable? It goes back to the question number three tadi itu. So, stuff like this, I think, beginning 2000s and onwards, with the emergence, or at least the vast use of internet, and also things that came together with internet, like social media, so on and so forth, websites, blogs, stuff like that, we may want to be extra careful. And why? Tu yang first contoh tu, second contoh tu, even if it appears in a newspaper, I think about 10 years ago, I saw this on Twitter. A person tweeted, dia kata before that so-called NASA kid, made a fool out of us, about the so-called NASA scholarship. About 10 or 15 years ago, there was also a student, or a group of students, who took photos for Aidilfitri, and they wrote down there dekat bawah tu, salam Aidilfitri from the so-called apa, gifted Xavier's school ke apa something tu. And then it got posted in a newspaper without thinking that the Xavier school tu is actually referring to the Xavier school in X-Men tu. So kita tertipu lah. Even berita harian kot rasanya masa tu pun got tertipu jugalah, fall into that so-called quote and unquote scam. Yeah, maybe those students were trying to, uh, um, saja-sajalah. Everyone seemed to send photos of them studying abroad and wishing Haidil Fitri to family members in Malaysia. They thought that why not we just make a fool or to Malaysians, and that came out in a newspaper. So as much as we feel safe of thinking that things that came out that come out in a newspaper can be accepted as truth, as benda yang sahih, tapi we can never know. So the bottom line is for you to check and check again. Has a source been cited incorrectly? So that would be the fifth question. The fallacy of inappropriate appeal to authority can also be committed if the arguer has not cited a source correctly. Okay, that is a clear cut. Number 6, does the source claim conflict the expert opinion? Okay. Is a source claim not one? I think this is a clear cut. Whichever that is not clear, then I'll explain. Yeah, is a source claim not one that can be settled by an appeal of expert opinion, or is the claim highly improbable on its face? Meaning to say, the more improbable a claim is, the less willing we should be accept it merely on the say so of a witness or an authority. If we accept an extraordinary claim on authority, and it is more likely that the alleged authority is lying or mistaken that the claim is true, we commit the fallacy of inappropriate appeal to authority. Okay, so these are basically the 8 questions that you may want to read and try to understand. And also, if you were to refer to the textbook, there are examples in order for you to understand better. So, what happened I think it was last semester that this came out in the so-called final test, where the question asks you to discuss 4 questions in terms of reliability and validity of sources. Okay, so the question talks about reliability and validity of sources, but actually they are referring to this 8 questions that falls under inappropriate appeal to authority. Okay, so we're done with the first one. Let us move on to the second type, which is appeal to ignorance. Now, the fallacy of appeal to ignorance occurs when an arguer asserts that a claim must be true because no one has proven it false, or conversely, that a claim must be false because no one has proven it true. So here are several examples. The first one, there must be intelligent life on other planets. No one has proven that there isn't. Or the second one, there isn't any intelligent life on other planets. No one has proven that there is. So these 2 examples basically they suffer from the same basic flaw. It assumes that the lack of evidence for or against a claim is good reason to believe that the claim is false or it true. Okay, it is true. So this part I think is quite clear for you to understand. Just because no one has seen a ghost, that does not sorry, just because no one has seen a ghost in that old house does not mean that old house is not haunted. Okay, all right. Tapi because you are making a claim, no one has seen a ghost, therefore the house is not haunted. Not necessarily. Okay, so appeal to ignorance is in this concept is trying where you are trying to say that because no one has proven it, therefore it has to be false. Okay, or no one has proven it to a claim has proven it false. It must be true because no one has proven it false. So if let's say um the house, okay, in the concept of the house is haunted, you can say that that house is haunted, and you ask why do you think that the house is haunted? Everyone is saying it. Or maybe because no one has not claimed that the house is not haunted. For example, you see, that's why you're saying that the house is haunted, or you're saying that the house is not haunted. Why you say that the house is not haunted? It looks creepy because no one has seen a ghost that lived there. No one has encountered any ghost there, so the house is not haunted. So there are two ways of looking at appeal to ignorance. Yeah. Next is false alternatives. The fallacy of false alternatives is committed when an arguer poses a false either or choice. Okay. Um, Here are two examples. So the first one, yeah. Look, the choice is simple. Either you support a pure free market economy or you support a communist police state. So you are giving two options. Surely you don't support a communist police state. Therefore, you should support a pure free market economy. Nampak tak? You are given two choices, and surely people will just fall into which one that looks rather um, rather convincing. Or you are given two options or two choices to which both are not of the same merit. In this case, they are not the same merit. The way you compare, you don't support free market economy, you're a communist. There are countries that are not communist countries, but they don't support a free market economy. Yes, ada. All right. Or the second one, either we elect a Republican as president or crime rates will skyrocket. Obviously, we don't want crime rates to skyrocket. Therefore, we should elect a Republican as president. So the way you compare, you elect a Republican president ke? Atau the crime rates will skyrocket? My God, they are of two different merits, two different things to be compared with each other. So this is what is meant by false. When you give options, when you give choices, when you present alternative, they are not of the same merit. But because you want to, kalau you even to a point that you cakap false alternative ni nampak macam you are trying to scare the people. Yeah, in a way, in a way of looking at false alternative ni, the way you present your options tu macam tak nak orang tu terpaksa pilih yang the obvious one. Okay, which is wrong. Alright? Okay. Next, loaded question. The loaded question fallacy occurs when an arguer asks a question that contains an unfair or unwarranted presupposition. So here's a particularly blatant example. Yeah. Have you stopped cheating on exams? No. Oh, so you admit that you still cheat on exams? No, I meant to say yes. Oh, so you admit that you used to cheat on exams? No. Can you see? This is what we call loaded questions. Your questions can be pretty tricky to a point that when a person is trying to answer the question, it seems that the person is the one who is doing it wrong ke, ataupun the person who is at fault. So it's easy to spot the trick here. Yeah? Jules questions, have you stopped cheating on exams? It's a loaded question because any direct yes or no answer will force Pete to admit something that he does not want to admit. So Joe's apparently single question is really two questions rolled into one, basically. Yeah, there are actually two questions that roll into one. So that is the thing why it's very important for you to understand. And this so-called conversation sebenarnya you will see this often in the courtroom or in the so-called court, where perhaps between the prosecutor or the lawyers, when they are asking questions to witnesses or even to the person who claim to be committing the so-called offense. So when they ask questions like this, they are just trying to put you or trying to corner you so that you'll be admitting something that you don't want to admit or you didn't do at all. Especially when we talk about apa ni in America, yeah, because America you have like a apa ni like a row of juries that will be listening to the so-called argument, and then these people are normal people that they can also be easily influenced. So that is why in America, even if you want to bring a case to the court, they also must study the nature of the so-called juries, yeah, to see how can they convince. So in America, it's not a matter of convicting someone who is at fault, but it is more how convincing you are in winning that so-called argument. Sebab itu kalau you tanya kenapa orang jahat tu masih lagi terlepas, because the lawyer that represents him presented a rather good argument compared to the prosecutor. So itulah kadang-kadang they can, alright, see how good the lawyer is. Questionable cause will be the next one. When arguer claims without sufficient evidence that one thing is the cause of something else, he commits the fallacy of questionable cause. So there are three common varieties of the questionable cause fallacy: the post hoc fallacy, the mere correlation fallacy, and the oversimplified cause fallacy. Now, this type of fallacies falls under questionable cause. Yeah. So let us start with the first one. The post hoc fallacy, okay, from the Latin post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore, because of this, Okay, is committed when an arguer assumes without adequate evidence that because one event A occurred before another event B, A is the cause of B. So let us look at an example here. How do I know that ginseng tea is a cure for the common cold? Last week I had a bad case of the sniffles. I drank a cup of ginseng tea, and the next morning my sniffles were gone. Okay? So in the given example, the arguer assumes that because his sniffles disappeared after she drank ginseng tea, drinking the tea must have caused the sniffles to disappear. This is precisely the kind of post hoc reasoning that underlines almost all quack cures. It is much more reasonable to suppose that the arguer never really had a cold or that the cold simply got better on its own. Ni macam we call it, just in luck. When you are having cold and then at the same time you drank a ginseng tea, somehow your cold get better or you get better, you feel that it was the ginseng that cure your cold. There's another term in medicine, yeah. Um, they call it I cannot remember, but I can remember the process whereby a group of people who suffer or who has a disease were given pills that are actually made of candies, but they were informed that those are actually pills to cure them. And after like a month, most of them recovered. Okay, most of them recovered without knowing that those pills are actually candies. So it's basically mindset. It's all mindset. But you get better not because of those pills. You get better because maybe, some other reasons that influence you. Oh God, I cannot remember the term. But if I do, then I'll share in the WhatsApp group. Ataupun kalau along the way, tiba-tiba it triggers me back, then I'll share with you. Okay? But if you know, then you let me know. So, lagi senang saya tak fikir. Kalau tak nanti malam tak boleh nak tidur. Okay, the mere correlation fallacy is committed when an arguer assumes without sufficient evidence that because A and B regularly occur together, A must be the cause of B or vice versa. So this is an example. Yeah. So on Monday, I stayed up all night partying, had eggs for breakfast, and failed my calculus test. On Wednesday pun, I stayed up all night partying and had eggs for breakfast and failed my biology test. On Thursday, I stayed up all night partying, had eggs for breakfast, and failed my history test. Obviously, to do better on test, I must stop eating eggs for breakfast. I think this is a clear cut of, type of fallacy, yeah, questionable cause, yeah. Why you look at having breakfast but not at staying up late at night, partying. So this is the reason, because when you do A and B at the same time, therefore you feel that, you know and of course you choose the latter, you feel that that is the reason why you are not passing your exam. Okay. So you kata I have to stop eating eggs for breakfast. You are actually not presenting the right argument here. You are just looking at one side of it. Yeah. Now, in the given example, okay, I've explained this. Or the last one is oversimplified cause fallacy. The fallacy is committed when we assume without adequate evidence that A is the sole cause of B, when in fact there are several causes of B. Okay, for example, violent crime has declined steadily in recent years. Obviously, tougher imprisonment policies are working. You implement something, and after that, you realize that that thing has gone down, which is good. But you must do further studies to make sure that whatever that you have implemented is the main reason why the decline happens. You cannot assume, because when the decline happens, that whatever that you are implemented or you have implemented, that is or can be one of the reasons to cause the second or the decline of that thing, if you get what I'm trying to say here. Yeah. So you, kalau you nak betul-betul pun, you have to do further studies, betul ke? Okay, for example, kita the whatever that we are doing right now lah, di PKPB ni, apparently when they impose the so-called MCO in the first place, we can see that the numbers have not gone to hundreds. It has gone down, and we are still dalam puluh-puluh lagi the numbers of patient yang positive with COVID-19. Okay, we can see lah, it is causing that, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. Maybe there must be something that has to do with what we consume. Malaysians particularly, that thing that we consume can also be one of the reason to cause the virus, or to protect us from the virus, and also some other reasons as well. So tu kalau you tengok in critical thinking, we are not being biased here. Tapi in other than critical thinking, people are biased. Now, another example is when medical terms says that, or medical people say that no, it's absurd drinking warm water can kill the virus. Although the so-called Minister of Health did not mention that directly. He was just suggesting what are the things that you can do. So in other field, it's like macam clear cut. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Tapi in critical thinking, we just have to stay neutral and look at all possibilities. We cannot be biased. That is the good part of critical thinking. So the way a critical person assess that situation, yang pasal minum air suam tu, they will look at a lot of perspective. They will assess at all possibilities. Tapi kalau if you're a person, a medical person, you'll just say no, there's no scientific proven apa semua. Therefore, tu yang committing yang question yang before tu, yang tadi tu, yang fallacy tadi, because no one has proven it correct, therefore it's wrong. Okay, so tak semestinya. Alright, so sebab itu kalau you tengok, people are questioning those who question the Minister of Health. I'm not trying to side on the Minister of Health. Yeah, I don't know him. I'm not a medical person. I'm just a person who is an expert in critical thinking. And when I look at that matter, I somehow agree to what he said. Not to the notion that drinking warm water is can kill the virus, but to the notion that we need to take precautions, and one of them is of course drinking warm water. Simple as that. Tapi medical people on the other hand feel that, oh, it has not been proven scientifically, therefore it's wrong. Not necessarily, not necessarily, because there are possibilities. We are looking at possibilities here. Okay, so coming back to the oversimplified cause ni pun sama juga. When you feel that by imposing PKP or MCO, it causes the decline of number of patients with COVID-19. Well, medical people will say that because that's how they see, this data and that data, how they are interconnected or correlated with each other. But as a critical thinker, we need to go beyond than that. Is there any other possibilities that can also be the reason to why the number of people who suffer or who got infected by COVID-19 virus, the number is decreasing or is declining? So we have to do orang kata an extended research on it. Yeah, we cannot simply just jump to the conclusion. All right. Okay. So we move on to the next type of fallacies of insufficient evidence. And so basically we are done with questionable cause, and there are three. Always remember that. Yeah. Now, next is hasty generalization. We commit the fallacy of hasty generalization when we draw a general conclusion from a sample that is biased or too small. Okay, I think we that is why when you do your research, and let's say the person who actually responded to your questionnaire, who actually involved in your so-called study, the number does not basically represent the bigger number. For example, you're talking about Malaysians, you're talking about Malaysians' interest in choosing genre for books, apa semua-semua tu, but you have conducted ataupun you have distributed the questionnaire to about 300 to 400 people. Tapi you realize that 200 300 people, does it represent the 32 or how many millions people of Malaysians that we have now? So that is the question. So at the end of the day, you cannot generalize whatever data that you have found in your research. Okay, so basically that is what hasty generalization is. When you're saying that, you remember, I think the recent survey conducted to see how racist people are in Malaysia, and we are at number 2. There was that issue, yeah. If you have came across this issue before, apparently we are at number 2. And when they do some digging, they realize that the study was conducted among 1000 respondents. So the question now remains, does that 1000 respondents represent the entire nation of our country, that people are being racist? So agree to disagree. Nampak tak? That person or whatever the claim that made by that so-called survey has committed hasty generalization. And if you're a critical thinker, in a case of myself, yeah, I would have rejected that notion masa tu juga when people say that. I don't think so. 1000 does not represent the whole nation. Although kita nak cakap, kita nak kata, but sometimes bila kita buat allocation of numbers of respondents, there is this calculation. Yes, it's true. The reason being is, takkanlah you nak buat satu study pasal Malaysians, and then you want to ask each and every single soul in Malaysia, or people considered Malaysians, even the young ones, the toddler baby ke apa pun, nak pergi jumpa dia, nak tanya betul ke you racist ke. Orang kata it is absurd. So that is why kita ada the calculation of sample of population. Dalam research, we have that term, where you have to calculate sample of population. The real population, okay, berapa banyak you kena conduct so that the data will be significant. Itu term dia. The data will be significant. Not that the data will represent the entire population. No. But the outcome of that so-called survey about that racism in Malaysia has the generalization. They feel and they think that that number represents the entire nation, which is wrong. Slippery slope. We commit the slippery slope fallacy when we claim without sufficient evidence that a seemingly harmless action, if taken, will lead to a disastrous outcome. Now, I would like to draw your attention to the example given here. Yeah? Senator Walker has argued that we should outlaw terrorist threats on the internet. Nampak, wow, baguslah senator ni. This proposal is dangerous and must be strongly resisted. If we allow the government to outlaw terrorist threats on the internet, next it will want to ban hate speech and other allegedly harmful speech on the internet. And then next, the government will want to censor harmful ideas on television, radio, and newspapers. So eventually, everything you see, hear, or read will be totally controlled by the government. Wow, dia punya conclusion, you see. First, it talks about why we should not accept the fact that the government wants to outlaw terrorist threats because we will end up having everything controlled by the government. What a huge leap from that side, that end to the other end. But because we feel that the first part when you introduce it was something big, although the second part tu tak ada nampak pun as big as the first part, tapi because of this slippery slope that easily people will fall into it, dia akan terus masuk dan terfikir, yeah, I think we should. I give another example. I think we all should ban jogging. Although jogging is good for health, but if you jog not carefully enough, it will cause you to fall down. And falling down, actually, if we were to do a bit of research or trying to compare few data, we will realize that people who fall down are often are the most reported people in emergency room in any hospital in Malaysia. So that will also cause more people to be overly crowded in the emergency room in Malaysia, as to a point that those nurses in the emergency room may not have enough hands to attend on some other matters which can be far more important. Oh my God, cerita pasal orang tak payah jogging sebab takut nanti you jatuh, up to a point to that. Can you see slippery slope ni? Itu yang buat orang macam, betul lah, alah. Oh, macam tu. Nampak tak? Sedangkan benda tu is totally irrelevant. Even if it is relevant pun, not enough evidence to support unless it is supported by good and reliable sources and evidence. So it goes back to the term of fallacies of insufficient evidence. Yeah. Weak analogy. This saying points to a mistake called the fallacy of weak analogy, which occurs when an arguer compares two or more things that are not really comparable in relevant respects. So let us look at example here. Teachers of false religions are like carriers of a deadly plague. Just as we rightly quarantine plague victims to prevent them from infecting others, so we should quarantine teachers of false religions to prevent them from spreading their spiritual poison. Nampak tak? The way you compare teachers to, they are like carriers of a deadly plague. Boleh ke? I don't think so lah. I don't think so. But I'm not saying that analogy is not good. But if you use the right analogy, perhaps you simplify that matter, people will understand better. But if you give a wrong analogy, or if it is a weak one, Okay, if it is a weak one, then people will just in my case, I will not accept that argument at all. But I think you just imagine having this so-called excerpt me given or this situation to happen among people who are not critical thinker. They will just say that kalau you tak faham konsep teachers of false religion, sih maksudnya, of course, for example, in America, Christianity too seems to be widely accepted as part of faith or beliefs in the institutions or religion institutions in America. So if I were to bring in Islam, and then I will be considered as teachers of false religions lah to them, okay, because I want to bring in Islam contohnya lah. So they compare me who wants to bring Islam to my students with carriers of deadly plague. I think that is not at all what teachers of false religions are. Yeah. So sometimes by giving a weak analogy, it can also be a trap to people who do not possess good critical thinking abilities. Okay. So they will easily fall into this trap. Tapi kalau kita critical enough, we can see that the analogy is not right. The analogy is not right. Okay. And the last one is inconsistency. Now, the fallacy of inconsistency occurs when an arguer asserts inconsistent or contradictory claims. So let us look at an example here. So there's this one person who said that preferential treatment is unfair and discriminatory. It has no place in college admissions. Concept preferential treatment is where dia masuk ni sebab dia pakai kabel. Masuk pakai kabel lah, that's the whole concept. So it has no place in college admission. So kawan dia pula tanya, but didn't you say a minute ago that you got into this college only because your father was a rich alumnus? And then that person answers, well, yeah, but what's wrong with that? I'm just checking. So this is the so-called inconsistent points in the so-called claims that you are making. It's like you are saying the otherwise, or you are practicing the otherwise. You say this, but in real life, you are doing it. You say it's wrong in an argument, but in real life, you are committing it. I think we may have come across this a lot in our life, and the terms like you don't practice what you preach, stuff like that is basically what we have in fallacy of inconsistency. Yeah. Okay, so I'm done explaining on that. I have also prepared some questions that you can do as part of the exercises at the following link. Please do so. Go to the link. Every the answers are already there. Not already there. That means if you answer the question, you will get straight away the response whether the questions has been answered correctly or the otherwise. Yeah. So any questions so far, everyone? Yes, Asfa, thank you. Placebo effect. Now I can sleep well tonight. Yeah, thank you so much, Asfa. Yes, placebo effect. Yeah, that's the term. So question, anyone?